Robert Mercer moved through the crowded streets of Boston like a ghost. 43 years old, with prematurely graying temples and perpetually tired eyes, he had perfected the art of being invisible. His apartment in the South End was sparsely furnished, practical, clean, and devoid of photographs or personal touches. For 15 years, he'd worked as a structural engineer at the same firm, arriving precisely at 7:30 a.m. and leaving at 6 p.m. His colleagues knew little about him beyond his impeccable work and occasional dry humor that surfaced during project meetings. This calculated distance wasn't accidental. It was architecture, carefully designed and maintained. Every morning, Robert woke at 5:15 a.m., ran 5 miles along the Charles River, showered, and consumed the same breakfast: 2 eggs, black coffee, wheat toast. Routine was safety. Predictability meant control. That April afternoon, rain threatened the city. Dark clouds gathered as Robert left work early, a rarity prompted by the completion of the Sullivan Bridge project. With unexpected free time, he found himself walking through Boston Common, watching couples huddled under umbrellas and children racing to finish their play before the downpour. He felt the first drops as he reached the eastern edge of the park. Picking up his pace, he cut through a playground where parents were already gathering their children. That's when he heard it. A small thud followed by a whimper. A few feet ahead of him, a child had fallen. The boy couldn't have been more than 3. Sandy brown hair, wearing a blue raincoat too large for his small frame. Without thinking, Robert stepped forward and helped the child up. The boy's knees were red but unscratched. He looked up at Robert with wide, trusting eyes. "You okay?" Robert asked, already scanning for the child's parent. The boy nodded, brushing dirt from his hands. Then, with absolute certainty and clear pronunciation, he said, "Thank you, Dad." Robert's body went rigid. The word hit him like physical pain, sharp and precise. His hand, still holding the boy's arm, began to tremble. "Jamie!" A woman's voice cut through his paralysis. "Jamie, honey, don't run off." A young mother approached quickly, relief washing over her face. "I'm so sorry," she said to Robert. "He's been calling everyone Dad lately." She took the boy's hand. "Thanks for helping him." Robert nodded mechanically, unable to form words. The woman smiled appreciatively before leading her son away, the child glancing back at Robert with curious eyes. The rain began falling harder, but Robert remained motionless. His mind had traveled 200 miles southwest and 12 years back in time, to a hospital in Austin, Texas. He remembered the antiseptic smell, the fluorescent lights, and the weight of the decision he'd made, the decision to walk away. He'd been 29 then, brilliant but unstable, buried in student debt and professional ambition. When Catherine told him she was pregnant, he'd felt his carefully planned future crumbling. They weren't married. They'd only been dating 8 months. He wasn't ready. The excuses had flowed easily. Catherine had looked at him with those fierce eyes. "I'm keeping this baby, Robert, with or without you." He chose without. He chose his career, his freedom, his selfish certainty that fatherhood would destroy him. By the time his son was born, Robert had already accepted a position in Boston, built a wall of silence, and convinced himself he was doing everyone a favor by disappearing. Now, standing in the rain, the magnitude of his abandonment crashed over him. What was his son's name? What did he look like now? Did he play sports or prefer books? Did he know Robert existed? Thunder cracked overhead as Robert stumbled to a nearby bench. He sat there, soaked and shaking, as commuters rushed past with newspapers over their heads. For the first time in 12 years, he allowed himself to wonder what he had thrown away. For the first time, he couldn't suppress the question that now burned in his throat. What had he done? The rain continued into the night. Robert sat in his apartment, scotch in hand, staring at his laptop screen. He'd done this before, searched for Catherine Hayes online, gotten as far as typing her name, then closed the browser. Tonight was different. Tonight, he pressed enter. There she was, in the 4th result, Catherine Hayes Weber, Associate Professor of Environmental Science at the University of Texas. Her professional photograph showed a woman he barely recognized, confidence in her posture, hair shorter than he remembered, smile lines around her eyes. She'd married. Of course she had. Robert clicked through to the university website, scanning for personal details, nothing about children. He tried variations of searches. Catherine Hayes Weber son, Catherine Hayes child. Eventually, he found a community newsletter from 3 years ago. Associate Professor Catherine Hayes Weber and husband Daniel celebrate son Ethan's 9th birthday with a donation to the Barton Springs Conservation Fund. Ethan. His son's name was Ethan, and he was 12 now. Robert wrote the name on a notepad, his handwriting unsteady. The next morning, Robert called in sick for the first time in 7 years. He spent hours researching Texas family law, reading about absent parents and parental rights. The legal terminology blurred together, but the message was clear. He had no claim on this child. He had provided no support, made no contact. Legally, he was nothing. By afternoon, he found himself at Logan Airport, staring at the departures board. A 5:20 p.m. flight to Austin had 3 seats left. His credit card was in his hand before he'd consciously made the decision. "Will you be checking any bags, Mr. Mercer?" the ticket agent asked. Robert looked down at his hastily packed carry-on. No, just this. 5 hours later, he stood in the Austin Bergstrom International Airport, surrounded by guitars hanging on walls and the scent of barbecue from Salt Lick. The Texas heat hit him as he exited, humid and familiar. He rented a car and checked into an anonymous hotel on South Congress Avenue. In his room, doubt crashed over him. What was he doing? What right did he have to disrupt lives that had presumably found happiness without him? He had no plan, no justification, nothing to offer but belated regret. Robert spent the next day driving past the university campus, rehearsing what he might say if he encountered Catherine. He found her office building, but couldn't bring himself to enter. Instead, he sat in a nearby coffee shop, watching students and professors come and go, wondering if any of them knew her, knew Ethan. On his 3rd coffee, a notification lit up his phone, an email from his boss asking when he'd return. Reality intruded. He had a job, responsibilities. This impulsive trip was madness. As evening approached, Robert drove to Catherine's neighborhood, information he'd gleaned from property records. He parked across from a modest, craftsman-style home with a basketball hoop in the driveway and a well-tended garden. Solar panels lined the roof. Of course, Catherine would have solar panels. Lights were on inside, silhouettes moving behind curtains. He was about to drive away when the front door opened. A boy emerged, carrying a trash bag to the curb. Even from a distance, Robert could see himself in the lanky frame, the way the boy moved with a slight stoop of the shoulders, his own posture mirrored across generations. Ethan, his son. The boy returned inside, unaware of being watched. Robert gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. What had he expected? That he could simply appear and be welcomed? That 12 years of absence could be forgiven in a moment of recognition? He started the car and drove back to his hotel. In his room, he opened his laptop and began writing an email to Catherine. He deleted and rewrote it 7 times before settling on 3 simple sentences. "This is Robert Mercer. I'm in Austin. I would like to talk, if you're willing." His finger hovered over the send button for a full minute before he pressed it. Then he waited, stomach knotted, for a response that might never come. The reply arrived at 2:47 a.m. Robert, still awake, heard the notification and lunged for his phone. "Frosty's Coffee Shop, 10 a.m. tomorrow. I'll give you 15 minutes. No greeting, no signature, just coordinates for what would undoubtedly be the most difficult conversation of his life. Robert arrived 30 minutes early, choosing a corner table with a view of the door. The coffee shop was a local place, filled with students typing on laptops and professionals having morning meetings. He ordered black coffee he couldn't taste and waited. Catherine entered precisely at 10 a.m. She spotted him immediately, her expression unreadable. 12 years had changed her, but not in the ways he might have expected. She moved with a self-assurance that was new, her formerly long brown hair now cut in a practical bob with strands of grey she hadn't bothered to colour. She wore simple dark jeans, a blazer over a t-shirt, and no wedding ring, an observation that surprised him. She sat down without ordering. "You have 15 minutes, Robert. Use them wisely." "Thank you for coming," he began, words feeling inadequate. "I know I have no right to—" "Correct," she interrupted. "You have no right. So why are you here?" The directness was pure Catherine. No small talk, no cushioning the conversation with pleasantries. "A child called me Dad in a park," Robert said, surprising himself with his honesty. "He fell, I helped him up, and he called me Dad. It broke something in me." Catherine's expression didn't change. "That's it? Some random event made you suddenly remember you have a son?" "I never forgot I have a son," Robert said quietly. "I just convinced myself he was better off without me. Convenient belief. I know." Robert looked down at his untouched coffee. "I was a coward." "Yes," Catherine agreed. "You were." Silence stretched between them. Outside, traffic moved along the street, people living their ordinary lives. "How is he?" Robert finally asked. Catherine considered whether to answer. "Ethan is brilliant. He builds robots in our garage. He plays cello. He has your analytical mind, and thankfully my social skills." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "He asks about you sometimes." The words hit Robert like physical blows. "What do you tell him?" "The truth, that his biological father wasn't ready to be a parent and chose to leave before he was born, that it wasn't Ethan's fault." She leaned forward. "I never poisoned him against you, if that's what you're worried about. I just didn't manufacture excuses for your absence." Robert nodded. "Daniel? Your husband?" "Ex-husband. We divorced 3 years ago. He's still in Ethan's life. He's a good man. I'm sorry." "Don't be. We're better as co-parents than spouses." Catherine glanced at her watch. 5 minutes left. "What exactly do you want, Robert?" The question he'd been dreading. What did he want? To ease his guilt, to satisfy his curiosity, to build a relationship with a child who had grown up without him. "I want," he began, then stopped. "I want to apologize to Ethan. Not for my benefit, but because he deserves to hear it. After that, I'll respect whatever boundaries you set." Catherine studied him, eyes narrowed. "You think an apology erases 12 years? No, nothing erases that." Robert met her gaze. "But it's the bare minimum he deserves." She stood up, gathering her bag. "I'll think about it. Don't contact Ethan directly. Don't come to our house again. Yes, I saw you last night. If I decide you can speak to him, it will be on my terms, with me present." Robert nodded. "Thank you." "I haven't agreed to anything yet." She took a step, then turned back. "Where are you staying?" He named his hotel. "How long will you be in Austin?" "As long as it takes," he answered. "I took a leave of absence from work." Something like surprise flickered across her face. The Robert she had known would never have put career second to anything. She nodded once, then left, the bell above the door tinkling in her wake. Robert remained seated, feeling both hollowed out and somehow lighter. For the first time in years, he had spoken his truth aloud. He had faced the woman he had wronged and survived. It was a small step, possibly leading nowhere, but it was more than he had done in 12 years of running. 3 days passed. Robert extended his hotel stay and explored Austin, a city that had changed dramatically since he'd left. He walked the expanded trail around Lady Bird Lake, ate at food trucks, and sat in the public library, reading books about reconnecting with estranged children. On the 4th day, his phone rang with an unknown number. "Robert, it's Catherine. Are you free tomorrow afternoon?" His heart raced. "Yes, any time. 4 o'clock. Zilka Park by the playground. Ethan will be there. He knows you're coming." The line went dead before he could respond. Robert arrived an hour early, pacing nervously near the designated meeting spot. Families filled the park, children shrieking with laughter on the playscape. He watched them, wondering how different his life might have been if he'd made another choice 12 years ago. At precisely 4, he spotted them walking up the path. Catherine first, then a tall, thin boy with a serious expression. Robert's breath caught. Ethan had his mother's eyes and chin, but Robert's high forehead and the same cowlick in his hair that Robert had battled his entire life. Catherine stopped a few feet away. "Ethan, this is Robert Mercer." She deliberately didn't use the word father, a boundary Robert respected. The boy studied him with an intensity that was disarming. "You look like your pictures," he said. "Pictures? Mom kept some. In a box. I found them when I was 9. Catherine gave her son a look of mild exasperation that suggested this had been an unauthorized discovery. "I'll be on that bench," she said, pointing to a spot 20 yards away. "Take as much or as little time as you need." Left alone with his son, Robert felt paralyzed. What could he possibly say to this child-becoming teenager who had lived his entire life as a stranger? "Do you want to walk?" Ethan suggested, seemingly more composed than Robert. They fell into step along the path, an awkward silence between them. "I'm sorry," Robert finally said. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I walked away." Ethan nodded, eyes on the path ahead. "Mom said you were going to apologize." "She knows me well." Robert hesitated. "Or she knew me. I'd like to think I've changed." "People don't really change," Ethan said with the certainty of youth. "They just become more of who they already are." The observation, so mature and yet so naive, made Robert smile despite himself. "Where did you hear that?" "My stepdad. Well, ex-stepdad now. He's a psychologist." They walked in silence for another minute. "I built a spectrometer for the science fair," Ethan said suddenly. "It won first place. Mom said you were into science too." "I was. I am." Robert felt a surge of pride, immediately followed by shame. He had no right to feel proud of accomplishments he'd played no part in. "That's impressive work for someone your age," Ethan shrugged. "It wasn't that hard. The math was the fun part." Another silence, less awkward this time. "Are you here to stay?" Ethan finally asked, the question direct, but his voice carefully neutral. "In Austin?" "I don't know," Robert answered honestly. "But in your life, if you'll let me, yes." Ethan considered this. "I have a dad. Well, not biologically, but Dan is my dad in all the ways that matter." "I understand. But," Ethan kicked at a rock on the path, "I guess I wouldn't mind knowing you. Scientifically speaking, half my DNA comes from you. That's significant." The clinical framing was both endearing and heartbreaking. "Very significant," Robert agreed. They completed the loop, returning to where Catherine waited. She stood as they approached, her questioning gaze moving between them. "Mom, can Robert come to my concert next week?" Ethan asked. "It's the spring orchestra performance. I have a solo." Catherine's eyebrows rose in surprise. "If that's what you want." "It's just logical," Ethan said with that same matter-of-fact tone. "If he's going to be around, he should see what I do." Robert felt something expand in his chest. Not hope, exactly, but possibility. "I'd be honored," he said. Later, as Catherine and Ethan prepared to leave, Robert handed his son a small package. "What's this?" Ethan asked. "A book on spectroscopy I thought you might like, and my email address and phone number." "No pressure. Use them if and when you want." Ethan nodded solemnly. "Thanks." As they walked away, Catherine turned back. "The concert is at Austin High, Thursday at 7 p.m. Don't be late." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. But it was an opening, a crack in a door that had been closed for 12 years. That night, Robert called his boss in Boston. "I need to make a change," he said. "Is there any possibility of transferring to the Austin office?" The conversation was long and complicated, with no guarantees. But for the first time in years, Robert was fighting for something beyond his own comfort, beyond his carefully constructed isolation. In his hotel room, he opened his laptop and began searching for apartments in Austin. Not too close to Catherine and Ethan, he needed to respect their space, but close enough to be present if invited. It was a delicate balance, with no certainty of success. Outside his window, the Austin skyline glittered against the night sky. He thought about the child in the Boston park who had accidentally set this journey in motion with a single word: Dad. A word that had been both accusation and invitation, reminder of failure and possibility of redemption. Robert had no illusions. The road ahead would be difficult, the trust slow to build, if it ever fully formed. There would be awkward moments, setbacks, the pain of confronting years of absence. But for the first time since he'd walked away from his responsibilities, Robert was moving towards something instead of away from it. Tomorrow, he would attend a cello concert and listen to his son play. It was a small beginning, but beginnings, he was learning, could come at any moment, even in the simple, devastating instance when a child looks up and calls you Dad.